Good morning. I'm Jessica Layton. I'm in for Joe this morning.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're happy to have you here, Jessica.
Thank
you for joining us. We're going to begin this morning with the latest on that seizure of an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela.
Attorney General Pam Bondi sharing this video yesterday's encounter on X. The video shows armed members of an elite Coast Guard team rappelling off of helicopters and onto the ship's deck. Bondi says they were executing a seizure warrant. Now, the president answered some questions about the escalation at a White House roundtable shortly after.
We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually.
What happens to the oil on that ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Bondi said the tanker was allegedly used to transport sanctioned oil from Venezuela and Iran. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now with more on this. Monica, good morning. What else are you learning about the latest confrontation with Venezuela?
Well, Jessica and Savannah, I think this is just the latest and obviously a significant escalation in this massive pressure campaign that the Trump administration has been waging against Maduro's regime, against Venezuela, that now seems like it could potentially expand even further. The president, when he did make that announcement, also included the fact that he said other things are going to be happening that you're going to see. He was vague on the details, but we know that in the last couple of days and weeks, he's talked about the potential for land strikes in Venezuela, but he's also talked about broadening this in the region and saying that other countries, like Colombia, for instance, where you saw that warning that he issued to the Colombian president there, could also be subject to some kind of response from the United States. And I think what's important to point out here is that you have seen this pressure applied from the military perspective with those strikes on the alleged drug boats. But now you're also seeing this economic pressure going after this sanctioned oil. But again, the president is the one saying that other countries could be subject to some kind of response by the United States as well if they deem that they are sending drugs that are bound for the United States. Remember, that has been the justification from the White House, from the president this entire time, even though they haven't publicly shown some of that evidence as lawmakers call for more information to be released.
Monica, switching gears, the Trump administration has been under pressure to share more files from the investigation into the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. We have an update here. Yesterday, a federal judge in New York granted the Justice Department's request to unseal grand jury records from the 2019 case. Do we know when those will be released?
We don't. We don't have an exact timeline of when those specific records are going to come out. But what's important in the context and the backdrop to all of this is that remember that the Department of Justice, because of a law that Congress passed, is supposed to be releasing the files that they have been able to now redact and are going to be able to make public by December 19th, basically in the coming days. That is the deadline that was set. Now, it's unclear exactly how that information is going to be rolled out, how much of it will come out. But it comes as now there are questions about this grand jury testimony that you just referenced. And separately, in a case related to Ghislaine Maxwell, who was, of course, Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator, that grand jury testimony has also been ordered by a judge to be released. But again, we don't know exactly when that's going to happen, if it's going to happen in conjunction with these other records. But we know that one of the most important factors here, according to the judge, is they do want to protect the victim's privacy. They want to make sure that there's nothing identifiable or anything that could harm the victims. But again, the victims throughout all of this, many of them, and remember, there are hundreds of them, have been pushing for the release of this information. So they would like to see this come out.
Monica, going back to the White House roundtable yesterday, the president was there with a group of business leaders, and he announced the official launch of his so-called Gold Card visa program. Remind us again what the Gold Card is and how it will impact U.S.-based companies, at least according to President Trump.
This is something the Trump administration announced earlier in the year, and now it seems like it's something that people can apply to. So essentially, those who want to establish U.S. residency can pay $1 million for an application, potentially, that if it's accepted, that's how much it would cost. There's a non-refundable $15,000 processing fee for every application, but then it even goes up from there. Businesses can pay $2 million if they want to sponsor somebody's residency. And then there's also this other tier of a $5 million process and application, which essentially is an even more fast-track potential for U.S. residency if an individual pays that and is accepted by the U.S. government. Now, of course, this comes at a time, guys, when there is such a crackdown on legal migration and certainly on other aspects of immigration. We have seen a major crackdown, obviously, from this administration. But just in recent weeks, it has been an even more concerted effort to limit who can potentially come to the United States, how they can go about that as the Trump administration is rolling out this way for very, very high-earning, high-paying people if they want that kind of process. Now, again, we don't know how long that's going to take, but this is something the Trump administration says could start, and the applications will be opening soon.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much. Well, on Capitol Hill today, the Senate is set to vote on dueling bills to address the nation's looming health care dilemma. So the rival plans include a Democratic proposal for a 3-year extension of those expiring Obamacare tax credits. Then there's the Republican proposal that would replace those subsidies with direct payments. Now, if Congress fails to act, tens of millions of Americans could see the cost of health care skyrocket in about 20 days. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. So you spoke with lawmakers about the state of these health care negotiations. Now, earlier this week, it really sort of seemed like neither one of these looked like they had enough support to actually pass, to actually become law, to actually have any impact for Americans. Has anything changed in the last 48 hours?
Good morning, Savannah. Unfortunately, for millions of Americans who are enrolled in Obamacare, it doesn't look like good news for them today because these two votes are poised to fail. Remember, they need to reach the 60-vote threshold. You talked about what the proposals entail. The bottom line here, as I'm talking to lawmakers, is that Democrats and Republicans are just so far apart on what they want here. Some Republicans are frustrated, though. They think that their leadership should have started working on this months ago. That includes Senator Josh Hawley. He's in favor of extending those tax credits to help people in his state afford the Affordable Care Act. But he also acknowledges there needs to be some permanent fixes. He says that we can't just keep subsidizing insurance companies. Take a listen to what he said, and then we'll hear from a Democrat on the other side.
I'm not happy with the status of things. I'm glad that we're going to vote on some options. I'm going to look at both of these options, and I think we ought to be doing everything we can to try to bring down healthcare costs. Everything.
Well, I don't think it's the right approach, but the only right approach is a bipartisan agreement to extend the credits. This is devastating. Some people are going to go without health care. We can't get to yes unless the president gets involved.
Look, President Trump says as recently as yesterday that he doesn't think his party needs to address this issue by the end of the year unless he's putting pressure on some conservatives who don't think these credits need to be extended, which is most of Republicans in the House and Senate. This is probably going to go nowhere, and these credits are going to expire at the end of this year. There's also proposals in the House to do this. Republicans are getting antsy, especially those who have states where there are a lot of Obamacare enrollees, Florida, Texas among them, but no light at the end of the tunnel so far.
Julie, let's talk about another major piece of legislation. It cleared the House yesterday. This is this $900 billion defense policy bill. It passed with a total of 115 Democrats voting with Republicans. There was some last-minute drama, though, specifically for House Speaker Mike Johnson. What happened there?
Yes, this is the National Defense Authorization Act. It is a must-pass bill. This is one of those items that Congress has to accomplish. In addition with funding the government, this is probably the second most important thing they do. And there was a lot of drama on the House floor. Speaker Johnson, as we've been reporting, seems to be losing his grip around controlling and coalescing his members. They've kind of gone against him in different discharge petitions, from Jeffrey Epstein to others that we saw on the floor just yesterday. And so with this vote, it was held open for more than an hour. We saw Johnson on the floor trying to get members personally to flip to yes. He was able to convince 4 of them, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, to get to the yes column. I'll also tell you that, for example, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was involved in trying to get a few of these members to flip to yes over provisions having to do with funding the Taliban in Afghanistan. So a lot of dueling things going on here, but certainly Johnson feeling the heat from his members. And finally, the procedural vote for this, that was what this was about, passed last night. The final bill still needs to pass. And then remember, it needs to pass the Senate.
Julie, one more thing before I let you go. This is a hearing that's taken place today on the Hill. Senators are set to question military leaders. This is for the first time about the president's deployment of the National Guard in American cities. What can we expect?
Yeah, this is the first time that they get to put Pentagon leaders in the hot seat over these deployments. And it comes just when a federal judge ruled yesterday against President Trump keeping and sending National Guard troops to Los Angeles, just one of the handful of cities that he has either announced or has sent National Guard troops to. And this is important and actually has to do with the NDAA a little bit as well, because Democrats I spoke to on the Senate Armed Services Committee, some of them are willing to withhold their vote for that package, even though they support it, because they feel like they can't control the president, they can't control the Pentagon and have proper oversight of the Defense Department, since the president just seems to keep sending these troops to these cities no matter what judges are ruling or what they are saying. That includes Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois, Chicago, one of the cities that the president has threatened to send troops to. It also comes weeks after that devastating, deadly shooting that left one National Guardsman dead and another one seriously injured in D.C. That's going to be a focal point of these hearings as well, whether these troops need to be in these cities, whether it's affecting their readiness. All of that I expect to come up today.
All right, Julie Sirkin, we know you'll stay on it. Thank you so much.
This morning, we're also following new pushback against the ongoing immigration operation in Minnesota. The state's Democratic governor, Tim Walz, is now calling out the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, in a new letter that he posted on X. Walz is raising serious concerns over what he called unlawful practices by ICE agents amid a growing number of arrests of American citizens during immigration operations. NBC News is reporting that more than 400 people have been arrested in the state since the start of December, when ICE says it first began its operation there. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Julia, good morning. First, walk us through what else the governor of Minnesota had to say.
Well, in a post on X, Walz said that the forcefulness, the lack of communication, and the unlawful practices displayed by federal agents will not be tolerated in Minnesota. This is just the latest in a series of shots fired back from Governor Tim Walz, who, of course, was Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate in the last election. He's basically been saying that this is not welcome in his state, and he's calling it unlawful. Now, this is an ICE operation. It's unlike those Border Patrol operations we've seen that have gone into cities like Los Angeles, Charlotte, most recently they're in New Orleans. But it's a little unusual for ICE to pick a city, and in particular, a community like the Somali American community or like the Somali community in Minneapolis to then go out and target. And of course, it follows the rhetoric by President Trump that he has problems with this community. There was a Justice Department investigation that found some benefit fraud in that community. But of course, those people were held accountable, and it's hard to draw the link between people they're arresting now and that fraud. But that 400 figure is actually much higher, I think, than a lot of people expected it to be. And it's higher even than what we're seeing from Border Patrol and their operations in New Orleans, where those numbers are still far lower than even 50.
Julia, you mentioned that the operations come up as President Trump has stepped up attacks on the Somali community. I wonder how that community is responding to all this rhetoric.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of fear in that community. You're talking about people who are legal, who are allowed to be in the United States, who are walking around with their documents, feeling like it's unsafe for them to go out. Of course, it's incredibly cold in Minneapolis right now, but people talking about just wanting to get home safely to their children. Most of this community, it's the largest diaspora of Somalis anywhere in the world. Most of that started in the mid-90s amid the Somali civil war. And so many of them are born in the United States. They could be naturalized citizens. A lot of people are legally part of that community. But I want you to listen to what someone said, an activist who's part of the American Islamic Relations Council, about what's happening there.
I want people to know that the Somali American community is an extremely resilient community. We went through a lot of challenges. We have been targeted many times. This is a moment for Minnesotans to step up, not to be silent, to speak up, to share your frustration, to share your support for the Somali American community, to talk about the best things about our state and their relationship to the Somali American community.
So there's definitely mounting tension and fear from that community, but no sign yet that the Trump administration plans to back down or end this operation anytime soon.
Yeah, that was my next question, actually. How long do we think that the operation in Minnesota could last? I mean, 400 arrests since the beginning of December. Is this just the beginning?
Well, what we often see is that they'll surge resources to a certain area. They'll bring in ICE officers who are not from a certain field office just to really focus on one particular area. And they may bring in other officers and agents from Justice Department components as well. We expect this won't continue much longer, but the exact date is unknown.
All right, Julia Ainsley, thanks so much this morning.
Well, in economic news, big news, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates by 1/4 point in its final meeting of this year. That marks 3 cuts total in 2025.
And although that move was expected, policymakers were divided with the decision, with 3 members dissenting. In his news conference yesterday, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said the central bank was now in a good place to monitor future developments.
We are well positioned to determine the extent and timing of additional adjustments based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. And reduced our policy rate by 75 basis points since September and 175 basis points since last September. The Fed funds rate is now within a broad range of estimates of its neutral value, and we are well positioned to wait to see how the economy evolves.
Joining us now on this is Brooke DePalma. She's a senior reporter for Yahoo Finance. Brooke, good morning.
Good morning.
Always great to have you with us. Good to have you here on set. Okay, so rate cut expected, but this dissidence between members was a little bit of a surprise. Walk us through what we learned.
Yeah, Jerome Powell even saying this is quite an unusual situation here, what we have. And there was 12 members in total. So while you might think you see Jerome Powell as the face of the Federal Reserve, he's just the Fed chair. There are 12 members, 9 of which agreed that they were going to cut rates by 1/4 point, but 3 of them dissented. And one of those dissenters was Stephen Murin. He joined the Fed back in September. He was President Trump's pick. He wanted a 1/2 point cut here. But then on top of that, there was 2 other quote unquote dissenters, people who didn't agree, and they actually wanted no rate cuts. And that was Austin Goolsbee as well as Jeffrey Schmid. And really what this is this situation where we have a weaker labor market, unemployment now about 4.4%, and also PCE, that's their the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge, that's also running hotter than the 2% target at 2.8% based upon the latest data. So an unusual situation of trying to play both sides here.
For sure. The other policy measure the Fed took up yesterday was to start buying $40 billion dollars in Treasury bills. What kind of impact does that have on the economy?
So essentially they cut rates because they want to keep short-term rates low. And by pushing in liquidity, pushing in cash in the markets, that ultimately is just making sure there's more liquidity, more cash in the markets, so those rates can in fact stay low. Now, keep in mind the Fed Chair Jerome Powell did say that the ample levels of liquidity, or rather of reserves, was falling low. And so they just wanted to essentially pump this cash into the system to make sure that the plumbing, the bottom, the base of the financial system continues to work. And this was something that Wall Street really liked. And that's why we saw the S&P 500 move higher yesterday afternoon.
What do we think for next year? What did they signal for rate cuts in 2026?
Well, Jerome Powell likes a wait and see approach, trying to understand where the labor market is going to go. Also, we have inflation. They think that tariffs are going to be a one-time hit to inflation, and so they're definitely keeping a close eye on that. But right now, they are expecting about, based upon the summary of economic predictions, ultimately they call it the dot plot, they're expecting 1 rate cut in 2026, 1 rate cut in 2027. But the caveat here, guys, is that Fed Chair Jerome Powell's term ends in May. There is much speculation that Kevin Hassett of the economic advisors will take that seat next.
So, Brooke, bottom line this for us right now, because everyone is concerned about affordability. What does this all mean for our wallets, for our bank accounts, for our finances?
Yeah, well, essentially, this just means it's cheaper to borrow near term. And so think about those credit card rates, think about those loan rates. Essentially, those will bring them down. Now, mortgage rates, that's kind of what we're all hoping for here. Well, he said that essentially a one-time cut, he actually told NBC's Christine Romans that a one-time cut wouldn't necessarily fix the mortgage rate situation that we have right now. He called housing a problem here. He said that right now there's a housing shortage that's also contributing to the problem within the housing market as well. And this is similar to what I heard from Home Depot Investor Day earlier this week. Age of homes are about 40 years old. There's low housing turnover, and people don't want to leave a 3% mortgage rate for a 6% mortgage rate.
Correct.
So this one-time cut isn't necessarily going to fix that there.
Looks like I'm staying where I live right now.
Yeah, for a hot second.
Thank you, Brooke. Good to see you.
Evacuations are underway in Washington state this morning after a powerful atmospheric river brought heavy rainfall and dangerous flooding to that region.
Yeah, the governor there has issued a state of emergency and also activated the National Guard through the end of the year to help with those evacuations and then also the eventual cleanup efforts. NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal has the latest.
A surge of rain putting the Pacific Northwest on flood watch. Heavy rainfall from a powerful atmospheric river has 8 million under flood alerts, set to bring an additional 7 inches of rain from Washington to Montana.
Take it seriously.
Entire farms and homes, even roads, underwater in Washington state. The Skykomish River already at major flood stage, set to rise even higher. Swift water rescuers on scene checking on homes. A state of emergency declared in Washington. And in Ording, officials evacuated up to 40 homes over concerns about levees overflowing.
If you receive an evacuation order, please follow that order.
Officials say this mudslide along I-90 blocked all lanes of traffic. No injuries have been reported. As the deluge swamps the Pacific Northwest, winter weather in the Midwest causing whiteout conditions in Minnesota and slick roads in North Dakota.
I've got another rollover, same location.
Where deputies assisting an injury rollover recorded a nearly identical accident on body cam. Another car crashing and rolling over right next to the first accident. The heavy snow stranding this school bus in Minnesota. Back in Washington, 17 rivers could see major flooding this week.
The situation is extremely serious.
All right, Camila Bernal, thank you for that report. And let's bring in meteorologist Angie Laskin for the rest of your forecast.
Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hi, ladies. Good morning to you. We've got a couple of things happening. You just heard Camila explaining a few of them, but let's dig deeper on those winter alerts first up. We've got 17 million people, and we've got a couple of things happening here. So you'll notice that there's some of those alerts downwind of the lakes. We've got them stretching from the Appalachians all the way back to Montana, and that's for that secondary system that's going to work through. But this morning, so far, we've got some really strong winds coming off the lakes, and that, of course, keeps the lake effect snow going again downwind of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. But otherwise, we've got this next kind of clipper system that's going to slide down from Canada through the day today, work into parts of the plains in the Midwest, and we'll see kind of that light to moderate snow from the northern plains all the way stretching down through the Midwest. You can see as far south as Kentucky, and this leaves us with some additional kind of travel troubles on the roadways. By tomorrow, we see some of these scattered snow showers working across the Great Lakes, and then we'll still be watching for some of those kind of slicker spots across the central Appalachians as we see more of that first system kind of working out. Between now and then, with those 2 rounds of snow, we're going to see some good amounts in some spots. So, of course, again, I'm a broken record here, but downwind of the lakes, you can see upwards of half of a foot, maybe 8 inches in some locations. And then across, again, parts of Illinois stretching into Indiana, you can see some of those higher amounts as well. So that is what's going on with those winter alerts. Now, meanwhile, we've had quite a busy couple of days when it comes to that atmospheric river across the Pacific Northwest. We have good news. We are going to see this slowing down through the day today. We're still dealing with some heavy rain across places like Seattle and stretching down to Mount Rainier, but this is going to, again, start to wind down and we'll see some improvements. Between now and then, though, we still have flood alerts, of course, because we've gotten so much rain in a short period of time and it's still ongoing. Now, once that winds down through the day today, unfortunately, our river flooding doesn't wind down. We're still going to see that be problematic here, even as we get into the weekend. And you can see how many of these locations are in major flood stage. We'll be watching for this to, of course, worsen as we get through the next day or so and closer to the weekend. So this is going to be something that we'll have to watch, guys, on top of the fact that we've got all that cold air settling into parts of the east, and we're going to see that expanding here as we get through the next couple of days. More cold air on the way as we roll into our weekend.
All right.
Wait, Shirley.
I can sense the excitement from both of you.
I'm actually into it. I'm fine with it. And you look prepared. I like your turtleneck.
Yes, turtleneck.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
It's like I knew the weather or something.
I know.
Thanks, Angie.
Yeah.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.